2023 is going to be a very interesting year, especially when you start to compare Calgary's current activity to Toronto and Vancouver. I am pretty lucky that I've reported on these things for over a year. My goal is to help you gain the perspective needed to make a professional decision. Now, let's dive into the CREB 2023 forecasted report. Now, please refer to the chapters below as this may be a longer than usual video. But anyways, my name is Adam Fyfe, your Calgary Realtor. Schedule a call with me if you want to dive into these numbers or create your own personal game plan for 2023. It's the very first link in the description, so let's get into it. So I'm going to start this off by looking at the table of contents just to give you a brief explanation of what to expect in this video. Now, the first four sections here is the forecast summary. Then there's the key economic indicators, which we'll touch on. The Calgary real estate market activity, I'm really not going to dive into because I do that every single month anyway. So if you're interested in that, go watch those videos. I am going to slightly touch on the surrounding areas for the housing market summary, just to kind of touch on it a little bit. More or less, I would expect you to pause the video and read those numbers and reach out to me if you have questions about those areas. And then the summary where I will give my conclusion. Now, how this is going to work is I'm going to bring up a slide just like this. I'm going to talk about some of the bullet points and then give you my opinion. It would be nice if you could pause the video on your own and read it in its entirety, because then you'll get the full picture. Not only will you get my opinion on it, you'll also get to see exactly what CREB has said in this forecast. Now, this first slide is just a housing summary. We're not going to get into any detail here. This is just going to be an overview or a recap. On the right-hand side in bold, you can see that elevated lending rates are expected to weigh on sales in 2023, bringing sales down from the record high in 2022. I do agree with that. I think that sales will slow down. Now, inventory is very low, so it's obviously causing a little bit of a friction for prices. I've touched on this a lot in my reports in the past. Now, if we go back to the left here, let's talk about sales. Forecasted sales of about 26,000 in 2023. Levels are still expected to be higher than the activity reported before the pandemic. Recent growth in migration and employment is expected to help offset the impact of higher rates. Now, we're going to touch on both migration and employment in future slides. Moving down, you can see that the higher lending rates are also expected to weigh in on listing growth in 2023, as it has become more challenging for move-up buyers. I really like how they brought that up, because in 2021 and 2022, there was a lot of people that were moving up because their equity in their home increased rapidly with low interest rates also being put into play. There was a lot of people actually stepping up into the market. If you look at the sales activity in 2015 to 20, you can see that it was very slow for Calgary, mainly due to economic factors with oil and gas and our job sector, which again, we'll talk about in future slides. But the higher lending rates have made it very difficult for people to move up here in Calgary. So a lot of the focus is going to be on net migration and how much people are moving to Calgary, which is going to keep our prices somewhat stable. Now, if we move along to supply, strong migration levels, supply levels are not expected to report any significant gains. So basically what that's telling me is that inventory is going to stay pretty tight in 2023, which is going to make it very hard for buyers to secure a good deal or investments to secure a good deal, because the supply levels will be very low, which will mean more competition for buyers in 2023. So game plans and actually putting a plan in motion well in advance is super important. Getting to know what's going on in the market and figuring out where the market's going to be in their specific price range within their specific area of town, which property type is going to be huge this year. You can't just jump into the market and expect the best. You have to plan in advance. Now, this one's kind of cool. Higher priced homes are expected to see some downward price pressure as the segment of the market is not experiencing the same supply constraints, meaning that the higher price point homes have a lot more inventory and a lot more selection than affordable product, what Calgary Real Estate Board would call anything between like $250,000 to $500,000. So from $500,000 to let's just say $3 million, there is still quite a bit of supply in that area. There is still demand in that area as well, but they're not going to have the same effect that the lower price point will have when talking about supply. Now, supply declines relative to sales for lower price point properties are expected to continue to support modest price growth. So this is where it gets kind of interesting, where we might actually see pretty good price growth in the affordable product sector, where we actually might see potentially a decrease or kind of a balancing out in the higher end of price point. There's a lot of different factors that we need to put into play, but that's kind of what they're kind of pointing towards. Now, total residential prices in Calgary are expected to stabilize in 2023, and that goes from the offset. So the affordable product is supposed to stay the affordable product is supposed to increase, where the upper end luxury product is supposed to decrease. That's kind of where they're coming from when they say stabilize in 2023. Now, we got to dive into all of that, but that is the housing summary. So let's go to the next one. So just like last one, this is just the economic summary. So on the left-hand side, we'll start with the persistent inflation in 2022 has triggered significant rate hikes from the Bank of Canada this year, moving from 0.25% at the start of the year to 4.25% at the end of 2022. That is a crazy increase, and there's a lot of businesses that are somewhat struggling to keep up with that rate of borrowing. This is really playing an effect on a lot of investors as well, which I talked to quite a bit of people about when they're looking at making an investment here. Given the tight labor market and persistent supply chain issues in some sectors of the economy, the recession in Canada is expected to be mild and short-lived. Fingers crossed for that. The strength in commodities is expected to cushion some of the economic impacts. Now, the strength in commodities would really be the oil and gas, our tech sector, our young professionals. They're doing quite well in Alberta, so hopefully that does soften some of the impacts, at least in Alberta. While economic growth is expected to slow, forecasters are not calling for a recession in the province. So if you actually read a few reports, they are somewhat saying that Alberta is going to help offset Canada as a whole. So if we see manufacturing decreases in Ontario or forestry decreases in BC, just as an example, Alberta's increase in GDP is supposed to help offset. Now, strong flow of migrants to the province, along with job growth concentrated in generally higher paid industries in Calgary, is expected to offset some of the impacts of higher lending rates are having on the housing market. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see some of the top considerations for 2023. Lending rates, migration, employment, and supply. We're going to touch on all of those things, and I think right now what I'm going to concentrate on is just supply. Now, low inventory levels, especially for lower price product, is expected to prevent widespread price declines in our city. Totally agree with that. If you're a buyer in the market, even right now in January of 2023, you will see that there is a lot of multiple offer situations. As the spring rolls around and as the weather rolls around to be a little bit warmer, I expect the supply to ease a little bit, but then that will also go into the play of the migration and the amount of people purchasing properties. So it will be very interesting to see how that low supply level increases for people here in Calgary, because I just don't think there's going to be a lot of people wanting to sell their home, at least not the same rates as they were in 2021 and 2022. Next, I really do like how they put this in here because it's just kind of a explanation of what to expect. Now, this is forecast risk, and I'm just going to jump right to where it says, thanks to record high sales achieved early in 2022, the year-over-year adjustments, especially in early 2023, will be far higher than the changes expected over the second half of 2023. What does that mean? So basically, because of the crazy increase that we saw in 2022 in the early half of the year, because we've stabilized and now we're starting to see somewhat of a flat line, if you would, with some moderate increases, we will actually see negative year-over-year percentages in some sectors, and that's going to raise red flags for some people. But if you think about it, the crazy increase in price is going to obviously drop and then stabilize, and just because it's not as high as it was last year doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just a year-over-year stat. So this is going to be very interesting and something that I'm going to have a heavy concentration on in the first half of the year, because I know that there's going to be people that see the negatives, the huge negative increases. They're going to think everything's falling apart, when realistically speaking, the supply is low, the activity is strong, the net migration is strong, and there's so many different factors going into this. Now, buyer and seller considerations, again, I really like how they do this. Supply gains have mostly occurred in the higher price ranges, while supply levels remain low compared to the demand for lower priced homes. So while total residential prices are expected to stable in 2023, buyers and sellers are likely to experience different price movements based on property type, price range, and location. That is super important for anyone getting into the market this year. You need to put in consideration the property type, the price range, and the location. All three of those can mix up into so many different outcomes for different people in all around Calgary. And this is again why it goes back to my previous point about just getting that consultation well in advance, 2, 3, 4, 6 months in advance, doesn't matter. Get your information and figure out what you need to kind of be expected to get into, I guess you could say. I'm kind of stumbling my words there. You just got to prepare for the future because everything's going to be different is basically where I'm getting with that. Now, the upside risk of the forecast, interprovincial migrants seeking home ownership may be less sensitive to rates should they be coming from a higher price market like Toronto or Vancouver. And downside risk to the forecast, uncertainty surrounding environmental and energy sector policies and investments impacting future growth prospects. So that is super huge right there. That uncertainty is massive because there's so many policies and political mumbo jumbo out there that we don't really know what's going to happen with Alberta. Now, our hope is that our premier and whichever government gets elected in the election that we're going to have this spring really does help continue the trends upwards. So there is just a lot of uncertainty right now of what's going to happen in the world of politics surrounding these things, because it could very easily and quickly be shut down and a lot of activity can slow down and this whole forecast is out the window. So really important to keep that in mind. So coast to coast comparison there's like so much to unpack here, and I could literally make a whole video about this. So we're just going to do a quick highlight. Now there's just a lot going on here. So I'm going to read the highlights and I'm going to go move down to the bottom. So I've highlighted here, before the pandemic, Alberta's economy was struggling as the drop in energy prices in 2014 resulted in significant job loss, a loss of migration, and an economic contraction. So I actually made a video early this year about why Calgary experienced a boom. I'll link it in the video below. It was kind of a perfect storm. We had a long period of little to no growth. And here's a perfect example. If you look at Calgary in the bottom there, you can see 2014, it was $438,000. In 2019, it actually dropped in price to $417,000. If you look at Toronto, 536 to 778,000, and if you look at Vancouver, 691, and it increased to 904. So those market centers had a massive increase of, I believe it was around 30 to 40%. And then if you actually look again from 2019 to 22, Vancouver increased from 904 to 1.2, and then Toronto increased from 778 to 1.2 as well. So Calgary did experience a really big uptick in price in 2021 and 2, but you can see that they did not have the growth that Toronto and Vancouver had since 2014, which really is playing an effect from those higher interest rates. Now, recent rate gains have had more of an impact on home sales in Toronto and Vancouver. Obviously, that's exactly what they wanted to target anyways. You can clearly see that they were running away in price, where Calgary was actually decreasing and then had a crazy increase of about $100,000 in 2 years. But even in those 2 years, Toronto and Vancouver both increased by $300,000 and more. Now, if we go to the right here, thanks to higher commodity prices, a shift in interprovincial migration, and relative affordability, Alberta is not expected to face the adjustments as other parts of the country. And future slides where I am going to touch on net migration and talk about a little bit about how much people are moving here. But as you can see, Calgary was already affordable. With the Alberta government actually putting a campaign in place, an advertisement in both Toronto and Vancouver, there was a lot of net migration that came here to Calgary, which really helped stabilize our prices. Calgary and Alberta also made multiple lists in 2022 for the most affordable place to live, for the best place to live, like the most happiest lifestyle and stuff like that. So Calgary really did hit a lot of good things in 2021 to help kind of stabilize our market. I would still argue that Calgary is very, very, very well priced. Some would argue, and depending on which area you want to focus on, I would still argue that Calgary is still somewhat undervalued. Now, that's a little bit of a loaded statement depending on, you know, the product and the area and all that jazz. But when you compare to places like Toronto, Vancouver, like Vancouver, I understand. I think Vancouver's very pretty. It rains 6 months of the year. Toronto, I don't really see a big drive to Toronto, besides it's one of the first places that people, you know, land when they come here from, you know, a different country and stuff like that. It's very congested. The lake's pretty nice, but I mean, there's really not that much of a drive to Toronto. The weather's nice, nicer, I guess you could say, than, you know, BC, but there's just really not much of a drive. The affordability is really, really high there. The cost of living is very high there. So I think Calgary's got a really good position geographically to do very well. We have some very dry weather. We're one of the sunniest cities in all of Canada. We've got the mountains and a lot of outdoor activities. Yes, we're cold. Everyone understands that we're cold. But the cool thing about the dry air when compared to both Toronto and Vancouver is that you can actually dress up and become warm, where the moisture and the humidity from both other cities really makes it difficult to stay warm in that in that realm, sorry. So slightly other note is you kind of look at Montreal here. It's kind of a cool one. You can see they went from 208 to 353, and then they went all the way up to 528, which is actually higher than Calgary. So Montreal also had a massive swing upwards in price. And again, I think that Montreal is probably going to do pretty well when you look at some of these higher lending rates. I think that they're going to hold pretty close to Calgary. I don't think they're going to see any crazy decreases, mainly because they didn't have that crazy run up in price like Ontario and British Columbia. So this next one here, lending rates and inflation, is quite interesting. I don't really know how I feel about this one completely. I'm not a mortgage broker. I don't want to be a mortgage broker. So I'm going to take everything that I say with a grain of salt. Typically when people ask me questions about this world, I usually point them in a direction of a professional, because I am not that professional. So the Bank of Canada is not expected to lower overnight target rates until 2024. That is something that I've heard from quite a few mortgage brokers that I have in my personal world. I think that, my assumption is we might see one, maybe two more increases depending on how inflation is doing, and then I would have to say we're most likely going to see a flat line and then potentially some decreases in 2024. Now if you look at the bottom of the little chart here, maybe I'll blow this up to be a little bit bigger, but you can see that the inflation, their forecast is supposed to drop significantly. Now I really hope that that's true. Again, I'm not an economist. I don't really know if that's going to come about. I think that we still have a lot of problems in our supply chain. I think there's a lot of political issues going on that might not help our inflation drop as fast as they're hoping. Again, I don't know. So all I can really do is talk about Calgary real estate. That's my wheelhouse. That's where I'm going to concentrate on. So I really hope that these things are true. I like where they're going with this, but again, I can't really speak on it. So let's go to the next one. Okay, population, pretty cool, very exciting. This is exactly what helped Calgary stabilize. So right off the hop, over the first 3 quarters of 2022, Alberta saw a surge in both interprovincial and international migration, contributing to tighter rental markets and ownership demand. So we don't have exact numbers for rents, but we can assume that from different factors that rents have actually increased considerably. They've gone up about 20% in some areas. Rent has absolutely gone through the roof. This is a really great time to bring up investors. Investors obviously are really having a hyper concentration on Calgary. It's not a very good time for investors because the cost of borrowing has gone up and the prices of homes have gone up. Yes, the rents have gone up, but not as much. Airbnb still makes sense in some areas, but long-term renters are a little bit harder to come across for a good product that actually cash flows positively every single month. Now, and that's for smaller homes. Much of the interprovincial migration has been driven by people moving from Ontario and BC. So if you look down here, Ontario has had 18,000 people move in the first 3 quarters of 2022. BC had about 7,000, and quite a bit from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and the territories as well. Now, international net migration, 70,000. From the forecast that I went to today, if you refer to my Instagram story, they are anticipating about another 25 to 40,000 migrants coming in 2023, which will again add on to some of the pressures of low supply and put pressures on rents. So we need to touch on housing starts, which we will in the future, further slides. But you can see that population is a massive factor right now that is keeping Calgary prices stable. This right here is one of the main indicators, in my personal opinion, that I believe that Calgary is going to experience a price increase, especially if low inventories stay where they're at, which we talked about in another slide. I think that so many people are moving here from other places that the prices, they won't drop. Like, there's no reason for them to drop. If migration keeps up and the supplies stay low, unless something major economically or politically happens, I really just don't think that Alberta is going to slow down anytime soon. We've got a lot of demand in the job market, so maybe we'll talk about that in future slides. So when talking about jobs, we want to bring up the unemployment rate because the unemployment rate is really good for Calgary right now. Calgary has seen the largest gain in employment in the province as it's benefited not only from job growth related to removal of COVID restrictions, but also reported strong gains in professional, scientific, and technical jobs. Now, during today's forecast, that was actually one of the biggest surprise for our chief economist. She was very pleasantly surprised to see professional, scientific, and technical jobs increase so much in Calgary. It really does showcase that our investments in those areas are working. Now, obviously, Working from home really played a big benefit into that, because now people can actually move to Calgary, lower cost of living. You can get a nicer house, a bigger house for less money. We are now attracting more people. We also do have a really good campaign going on right now for tech companies. We have, I think there's like 4 or 5 pretty big companies coming and setting up shop in Calgary right now. And that's very exciting for us, because we're turning into a small tech hub in Canada, which is really, really good to see. I think there's a lot of people noticing Calgary with the cost of living and just a really good lifestyle. Job growth is expected to slow in 2023 to 1%, which is fine. We're still seeing growth and not declines, which is really nice. So you can see that Calgary and Drumheller actually saw a pretty big increase of 7.34. That could be because of tourism. I don't really know why that is, to be completely honest with you. Edmonton has also seen a nice little bump in job growth as well. Edmonton, from what I found, just kind of going off the cusp here, I actually had a stint in Edmonton, and I actually sold real estate in Edmonton. Edmonton is really steady Eddie. They have a lot of government jobs and a lot more stable jobs compared to Calgary. Calgary's very white collar. We've got a lot of corporations here. Edmonton's a lot more blue collar, a lot more steady jobs. So their highs are not nearly as high and their lows are not nearly as low. Edmonton is actually a really nice kind of in between. A lot of people do really enjoy Edmonton for that reason. Now, Edmonton, there's really not much around Edmonton besides the West Edmonton Mall. Calgary, at least you have the mountains and stuff like that. Edmonton does get pretty freaking cold too for quite some time, where at least Calgary you get some Chinooks. But for the most part, Edmonton's not a bad place. It's a lot more steady Eddie, and yeah, their job growth is nice to see in that area. Red Deer, don't know what the hell's going on there. They saw a little bit of a decrease. It's not by much, but yeah, Red Deer. 2023 forecast, the growth is supposed to be 1% and the unemployment rate is supposed to be 5.8%. Now, Alberta, I'm assuming this is the forecast for Alberta, is supposed to be 5.1% for unemployment, where Canada is supposed to be, or sorry, yeah, the unemployment rate for Alberta is 5.1, where Canada might be at 3.72. Now, there's not very good clarity there. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but that's employment rate. All right, so housing supply, new home impact. This is something that should be of major concentration for a lot of people, because this is really going to help dictate what's going on. In 2020 and 2021, if you look at the bottom here, you can see that there was a very, very slow growth in that. 2020, obviously with COVID and a lot of people not being able to work, there was a super big slowdown, and then there was a lot of people going on the benefits from the government and not going back to work, which was a huge factor put into play. I'm glad to see that housing starts are finally back up to 2014 and 2006 levels. Now, some of the supply challenges are expected to be addressed by the new home market. Calgary, we do have some pretty good new home starts. There are some really nice areas being built in both the southeast and the northwest. Those to me are very exciting. I think that there's a lot of interesting opportunities, especially if you look at like Livingston, where the Green Line is being built, which is an LRT that's going to connect the southeast, where you can technically call that Mahogany or Seton, going all the way up to downtown and all the way up to Livingston. It's going to be absolutely fantastic for those people. So those are some pretty cool projects that you might want to look into if you're looking for a long-term play. So as an investor who's looking to capitalize on an opportunity, when that train gets built, the expectation is that those homes are supposed to increase in price, but that's a whole nother video. While some of the supply challenges are expected to be addressed by the new home sector, there are no indications that current construction levels relative to the population size will create the scenario where we will see too much supply come into our market. Kind of stumbling my words there, but for the most part, what it's saying is that I don't think that we're going to have so many new homes that it's going to offset. I really do think that the inventory is going to be quite low for the next few years. It doesn't matter how many new houses are being started and built. I just don't think it's going to oversupply the market. Now, condos are interesting. That could happen in condos, because condos are very easy to build 500-600 units, where new houses, like new homes detached, are obviously a lot slower. It takes about 8 months for them to get constructed. Now, that's a whole nother scenario. If you're interested in that, that's a whole different topic in itself. Calgary condos are very interesting because we've had a long bad reputation for oversupplying in condos. Right now the demand is there, but I'm worried in a way that in the next 5 to 6 years, obviously depending on a lot of economic factors, if we're going to get back into that oversupply market. It's not uncommon for Calgary. It is a little bit upsetting to see, but it's good to see that the demand is there right now. The larger concern is that the supply levels remain exponentially low relative to demand, which could prevent more home prices from stabilizing this year. Again, goes right back to what I said before. So I would have an assumption that there is going to be some lower inventory levels. Again, this is why I'm thinking that prices are going to actually increase in 2023 and comparative to what this report is saying, where they might flatline. So here's the Calgary resale market for 2022. I'm not going to really touch on it too much because I really do talk about a lot of this information on those 5 videos that I post every single month. Now, prices rose by 14% from the end of 2021 to the peak in May 2022 as sales growth far exceeded the additions to supply. So again, I did touch a lot on this for my different videos. So we can look at sales have increased by 7%, new listings thank God increased by 3%, inventory dropped by 21%, months of supply, which is the activity or the length of time that homes on average sell. So the months of supply is 1.68, meaning that it will roughly take 1.68 months for the amount of homes on the market to actually sell at its current activity. Now, benchmark price did increase by 12%, which is great to see, $529,000. Now that is total residential. That is every single property type in Calgary morphed into one stat. Again, I'm not really going to talk about this. If you're curious about that, just go to my other videos. I talk about it a lot in them. Again, this is another thing that I'm just really not going to touch on for this video. Now pause the video if you're interested. You can look at all the stats here and you can see all of the different things that have happened in the detached market. It is quite interesting to see and look and read through. But again, just in this video, I'm not really going to talk about it. Same goes for semi-detached. I just scrolled to the next one. Same idea. I'm not really going to talk about it. Please pause the video if you're interested in the semi-detached market. Now, row and apartments is going to be interesting to watch this year. I'm just going to touch on this a little bit. Row is probably going to see one of the bigger increases in all of the sectors in Calgary. I think that row is pretty affordable for a lot of people, especially when they move here from out of province. So this section or this sector is going to be very interesting to take note on in 2023, because I'm pretty sure we're going to see some pretty good increases. Even though the detached and the semi-detached may flatline or increase slightly, I'm pretty sure that row is going to increase somewhat greatly. Apartments are somewhat in that same boat. Very affordable product. I think that this is going to be a sector that I'm going to have a pretty big concentration on in 2023. I think there's going to be a lot of price growth in this area. I think there's going to be a lot of investors looking at this sector as well, especially for that Airbnb kind of market. I think that there's still a lot of opportunity for Airbnb. I think Calgary has got a very good foundation built for investors that are interested in this market. Now, apartments just in general, they're affordable. Yeah, that's pretty much it. They're affordable. I think people are going to buy them. I'm pretty sure we're going to see another increase in price in apartments, which is great, because apartments, to this day, right now, January 2023, apartments are not at the level that they were at in 2013. We've hit 2006-07 levels, but we haven't hit those 2012, 13, 14 highs. So it will be nice to see us at least get back up to that price point that we were at. Again, watch my other videos because I talk about that in a lot more detail. So moving along, I'm not going to talk about these things too much, but please feel free to pause the video. I'm going to just kind of sift through these somewhat quickly. Airidrie, pretty much all of these locations all across Calgary have seen some pretty nice increases year over year. Affordable product, again, in Calgary is going to be very busy. Airidrie and some surrounding communities do have a lot of affordable product, so keep an eye out for that. Cochrane is a fairly well-known kind of retirement community. Now they've got some pretty good price increases as well compared to last year. 2023, I'm expecting to see a little bit more of a price increase in that sector as well. Okotoks, I don't really do much in Okotoks. I'm just being honest with you. I don't really keep track of Okotoks. I don't know what's going on in there. I see that they've had a really nice year-over-year price increase of about 16%. So that's really good to see for Okotoks. Chestermere, same thing. I really don't do a lot of business in Chestermere. I do like the lake there. I think it's a really nice area to be in, especially if you have a boat. They also saw a 16% year-over-year increase. It's a really nice retirement community directly east of Calgary. You get some really nice views of downtown and the mountains. You're a little bit farther away from the mountains, which some people don't like, but again, if you're looking for affordable product on in a lake community, I think that this is a pretty good area to be. And there's a lot of growth in Chestermere as well. High River, same thing. I've never done a transaction in High River. I can't really speak on it too much, but you can see that they've had some price increases of about 14% year over year. So here's a High River. Please pause the video if you're interested. Strathmore, I have had one transaction in Strathmore. It's quite a distance from Calgary, so it's not worth me driving all the way over there. Strathmore is very quiet. It's a nice little area. I mean, the prices are fairly cheap. You can see that the benchmark prices on the bottom right are $382,000 compared to Calgary, which is over $500. So, I mean, if you're looking for, again, affordable product, Strathmore might be of consideration, but you're looking at, I think it's about 45 minutes away from Calgary. So it's definitely something to consider if you're interested. Canmore, I would love to spend more time in Canmore and do more real estate in Canmore. I just don't. It's a very small market. It's growing quickly, but you can see year over year they've actually had over 17% increase to $839,000 for their price point. Now, it is a lovely area. I spend a lot of time in Banff. It's kind of funny actually that this photo right here in the background is actually in Banff. That's Buffalo Mountain, that's Arundel. Canmore is actually in between this mountain here and this mountain, so a little trick for you there, but for the most part, Canmore is really pretty, really popular for investors, quite expensive. I would love to do more business in Canmore. I don't follow it. So here's a summary. I'm not going to dive into it now. Pause the video and go through some of the numbers there if you want. There's really not much that I'm going to touch on, to be completely honest with you, so just feel free to pause it. But with that all being said, here's my conclusion. I believe that the forecast is just a little bit conservative. If you look back at the 2022 forecast, you can see that they were wrong in quite a few areas. Now, it was nothing major, but they didn't anticipate what was about to happen in 2023. And for that reason, I would have to assume that they're making a safer bet into Calgary's future. So they can kind of boast about some bigger increases than what they shared with us today. Now, from what I see in the numbers after doing this for over a year, I really do expect to see bigger increases in price year over year than what they posted. They basically posted a flat line with next to no increases. Now, I would argue that a little bit. Now, there are definitely factors that you need to put into play. Now, if the Bank of Canada continues to rise interest rates all throughout the year, then yes, obviously I could agree that we'll see a flat line, if not a decrease. But from the indicators that I see, I just don't believe that they will continue to rise rates too much higher. Now, the war in the Ukraine is obviously going to play a massive effect. Provincial and federal policies will play a huge effect, and continued investments will play a very large effect as well. Alberta really had a successful campaign in Ontario, having 18,000 people move here in 3 quarters. If Alberta is going to do that again or have another one of those campaigns, it could add more pressure on our already low inventory. So there's just so many things to put into play, and this is just a video to kind of give you my thoughts. I'm very excited to rewatch this in a year and see what comes about it, but 2023 is going to be a very busy year. So please make sure to subscribe to my channel. If you made it this far, honestly, thank you so much. I would just, what can I say? A comment, I made it. If you comment, I made it, I'm going to delete the comment so not everyone can see that you've done that. And I'm going to reach out to one random person at the end of it and thank you and maybe give you a gift card of some sort, because this was a really long video and not something that I'm used to. But Calgary's going to be very busy, and please subscribe to my channel because I do plan on doing a lot of these market reports every single month. I'll do what I can so I can provide you with a no BS market report so I can help you make a better financial decision if you plan on stepping into the market in 2023. So once again, if you want to chat about these things in a lot more detail, as well as you want my advice on your personal game plan, because that's going to change for everyone, go ahead and book a call with me. It's the very first link in the description. Thank you very much for watching my take on the 2023 forecast, and until next time, peace.